Do you build software or do you buy software? You probably do both, but when do you decide which one is the right one? You're probably picking the one that is the most economical and the most feasible for the business. What's going to cost the best from a price perspective, but also from a time perspective. Usually we forget about the time perspective and trade it off from a cost perspective, looking at simply the cloud hosting vendors' server compute costs, but we often discount our own time or our team's time when we take considerations about which version should we buy. Should we buy the open source of the shelf software, or should we buy the API provider? Should we buy a cloud service offering? Or should we do it ourselves, build it ourselves, install some open source software onto some servers, scale it, manage it, and maintain it ourselves? Now, it's a very tricky proposition because there's a lot of variables that are going into it. Which one do we choose? First, let's take a quick look at really what does it mean build or buy, right? A build scenario is when we are taking usually open source everything, right? Tools, frameworks, protocols, everything that exists in the open source world. You're thinking about a PubNub perspective with real-time data, sending JSON messages between devices. That is a PubNub API that you can buy, essentially the buy option. The build option would be to install the equivalent Socket.io, SignalR. These are something that you can install from open source repositories onto servers, and they make it easy for you to host these systems yourself. The challenge, of course, becomes orchestration operations to that open source service, and that's something that you would calculate on your own to say, hey, is this service economically viable for the project that we are currently assigning it to? You'd be responsible for maintaining all the virtualized and physical software and hardware from a service and security perspective, the upgrades, patches, and you have to maintain the platform and the enhancements that are all associated with the project. Now, say there are some significant fallbacks and protocols and problems, you would, of course, have to upgrade those or come up with some alternatives if there are current known vulnerabilities. Whereas when you are buying something, the vendor is responsible for all of those things. The vendor will take on the debt, right, to own and operate the software that services the capability that you're currently trying to achieve. And all you have to do is interface with the vendor's API, usually through an SDK that they've already built with JavaScript, Python, Ruby, C#, Objective-C, Swift, Java, Kotlin. That's a lot of languages and a lot of ownership that needs to be maintained. The vendor, like PubNub, will take on that debt and the ownership and the upkeep of all these systems and SDKs and interfaces into the real-time capability. All the things that go with it, the heavy lifting, such as scaling, reliability, replication, maintenance, analytics. Oh, I forgot about analytics. Developer tooling, testing. There's a lot that goes into this, isn't there? Because you can't just release an API or a service on your own system. You need ways to interact with it. You need ways to test it. You need observability, you need ways to log and track it over time, you need to be able to upgrade it. There's just a lot to it, and that's the ownership that you take on when you're doing decision making for build versus buy. Rather than buying software or service through an API, like PubNub, for example, you would be able to make a decision to build it yourself. There are scenarios where this makes a lot of sense, or you might want to choose to build it yourself rather than purchasing it from a vendor. One of my favorite options for the DIY solution is that you just really want to learn and understand how that technology is going to work. And you will learn a lot more by building yourself. You'll understand where the technology comes in, where the scalability challenges are, the different aspects of the technical limitations of the systems and protocols. You'll be able to learn this firsthand by building it yourself. This is a really good learning experience and probably one of my favorite reasons for DIY. And you would be able to really, you get to learn like more than you ever could in any sort of academic environment or even training or videos or reading about it. If you build it yourself, this is something where you have hands-on, you're going to get that experience, that human experience, and it's going to give you the most knowledge possible. So when you're going through this process for DIY, you're going to go through these scenarios here where you need to follow the common industry patterns in order to make a maintainable, scalable, and a really good system that your business can rely on. Of course, it comes down to how long is it going to take you to build and update and maintain the system going forward. That is one of the most common, didn't think to do that. A calculation that you forget to include in all of your estimates is your own time and your team's time. That's something that you definitely can't forego, especially if you're doing it yourself. It's just often easy to forget. It's the labor, it's your time, and it's a high cost to the business, right? And then it doesn't stop there. There's maintenance and orchestration. So as the product feature needs to scale with users and over time code gets outdated, you need to make sure to update the code, patches, and you need to be able to make sure the system can scale. And that's challenging, overall, generally challenging, and time that is often not even added into future considerations. It's that ownership, that debt, that code debt that you run into. It requires additional maintenance going forward. Now here's the easy one of the easiest ones that often is the only one that usually makes it onto a piece of paper when you're evaluating build versus buy. You will take a look at the server hosting costs. For example, you can lease a server and compute hardware power from Amazon and Microsoft and Google. Usually you're gonna do this on an hourly basis, right? They're gonna charge you like a price per hour. Often they segment that by number of minutes and round up to every minute. That's a lot easier to calculate because it's real dollars per hour that you would put on a piece of paper. And that's the one that's usually the only aspect that makes it onto that decision process, is adding that server cost onto the evaluation cycle. But definitely don't forget that you have to also do upkeep from a security perspective of that server, and any additional problems that you're going to run into is that deep technical aspect that you might not have based on that technology, because you've installed some open source software for building it yourself, and usually that open source software is really complex. And if you need to add more features to that system, you will have to invest a lot more time into figuring out how you can possibly do that. And then you've forked the system, or you've implemented into a plugin ecosystem that requires a significant amount of knowledge that is then added additional debt into your project overall. That is often overlooked when you are considering DIY. If you're making a decision to purchase software from a vendor using their APIs or other kinds of software hosting solutions, the first thing that you're gonna look at is the price, right? Because there's a price tag associated with it. And it looks scary. The cool part is that is one of the only major aspects that you're really gonna take a look at when you're considering build versus buy. The hard part is estimating, if you're making a decision to build in-house the DIY solution, how close would you be able to get in comparison to that actual price tag that the vendor is showing on their website. And it is a very tricky challenge to be able to do, because there's so many aspects when you're deploying a service that's meant to scale and has good uptime and will have the ability to be a generally, you want to make sure it's easy to maintain, right? You want to make sure that that service is easy to maintain, and that's always a challenge, and especially depending on the team size, how many hours are you going to devote to this service? Because now it is going to be your job to set up and maintain those servers, install and update the software and the versions, upgrade the features, right? Because there might be a feature that you need that's extra, any new service capabilities that you're going to need to add because you're expanding the product line, and you're going to need those new service capabilities, and any performance maintenance that you will also need that will come up because your system's going to scale, you're going to have more users, and you'll need to make sure everything's working and has a good user experience. Really, after all that, it just kind of seems like it makes a lot more sense just to make purchase decisions to buy from a vendor as much as possible. And it actually turns out the amount of software and technology that's used in a business, I would say more than 90%, easily more than 90% is purchased. And so it actually becomes a lot easier to make a buy decision for as much of the stack as possible, because it's something that your business is already doing. You don't purchase your own tracking management system. Well, actually, you don't build your own. You don't build your own Jira or Atlassian or Trello. You don't build your own Google Docs or Office or Microsoft Office technology. You don't build your own presentation system. You're probably not building your own database. Security scanning systems like Sneak that will go through all of your existing infrastructure, your source code, and all the libraries and dependencies, and run scans for vulnerabilities and give you easy click button security upgrade patches. That's something that you would pay for. You'd pay for Sneak, right? You don't want to build that yourself. Usually CRMs, right? Customer relationship management systems like Salesforce, you probably won't build one of those. You're going to buy that. You're going to choose to buy that. There's so many more systems and HR systems, accounting systems that your business will choose to purchase. You will buy these technologies usually through lease agreement from the vendor or provider that will allow you to license the software to be used in either an online cloud process, right, through a portal, or through an installation process on the system, or to be run on servers. This technology is bought and you don't build it. So really it comes down to, it's kind of interesting that you might more often than not better be situated to purchase software and lease compute power from a vendor like an API provider like PubNub. Gives you that real-time capability for allowing devices to communicate seamlessly no matter what environment they are in or what operating system and the varieties of stacks that they run on. Those vendors like PubNub will be responsible for reliability, scalability, the redundancy, right, to make sure that even when hardware fails, because it's going to fail, it will fail. Systems fail all the time. Even entire data centers go offline. What do you do in that case, right? The vendor is responsible to ensure that all that system can maintain up and available to your users, even during downtime. Which is kind of interesting. Just trying to think, even as I am CTO at PubNub, we often look at a lot of systems that we need to either decide to make a purchase for or build it ourselves. Now, when we look at it and we see, because we have 1 billion devices connected to our network, very often there are not many systems that can reach that level of scale. So we depend on technologies like Rust to compile languages and services that we can offer to our customers in such a fashion that allows us to offer it at high scalability, high performance, and those are often pressures against us that require us to build those kinds of systems. However, for basically everything else, where either it's a service that's already matching that scale capability, like a CDN provider, for example, or some business workflow process management, then we're going to purchase that. I mean, that's like a no-brainer, right? Because it is less debt to us overall. We can switch vendors in the future if we wanted to. It's just a lot easier to deal with purchasing rather than building it ourselves in-house. Are you going to build or buy? What are the key considerations to make this decision? And guess what? Over the years, 90% of the time, the business will choose to purchase leased compute from a vendor. This is because most of the time, a lot of the technologies that are leveraged, just you don't have the team, the size, or the need to really invest in building yourself. When you're considering a DIY solution, you'll often want to weigh priorities over how much from an ability to make changes in the future. Say, for example, you want to have a deep embedding into a certain particular aspect of the feature, and that you know for a fact that you're going to need to have a significant amount of control over that data aspect, over the product's future, the roadmap, and all sorts of features. Now, very often, a vendor will be fairly horizontal and provide a specific capability that most of the time you don't want to build as a business, such as a CRM where all of your relationship management goes to live and it's in a database like Salesforce. You don't want to build that yourself. You don't want to build your own ticket tracking system like Jira and Atlassian. Guess what? It extends to all these other scenarios and key considerations. We're going to take a look really quick. Very often when we're looking at build versus buy, so here we're going to use PubNub as an example for the buy section, right? So this is where we're going to say is the purchasing decision is in the left side, and the build over here is in the right-hand side. We're going to see the trade-offs and the key considerations. Every single time that you choose a build, you're going to need more engineers, and that amount of time is typically overlooked. You won't necessarily see that the additional investment needed in the team size for full-time employees is going to be required for a build solution. That's why very often you will pick a buy solution, because you'll be able to more quickly get to market. We see a time to market here is about 3 times faster and can be even faster than that. Often we hear it only takes a few days to implement with a vendor's API, leveraging their SDKs or just using their APIs directly. Now, the drawback is if you're going to build it yourself in that you'll need more 6 months at least just to get to market launch. That's because you have to build your own APIs and you have to implement the infrastructure, orchestrate the scalability, a whole bunch of things you have to build from scratch, which adds to the time to market challenge. And we see a significant upfront cost in the time to market just to get the product feature capability launched into production, so that way customers can use it. Your users will be able to take advantage of that feature that you built. A significantly higher cost, and that cost comes from the additional team that's required, and that's often overlooked as the amount of time that's needed in order to build that capability. It's a lot cheaper to go to market when you're choosing a vendor to leverage the capabilities as much as possible. You'll lean on the vendor for all those capabilities that are needed that you no longer have to worry about. These things like communication hosting, balancing, traffic management. Ooh, spikes and concurrency. That's a good one. Very often you might have a large surge of users that you'll need to be able to support. Your infrastructure has to support that. And that is even more cost upfront, right? That time to market will either have to be extended from 6 months to 12 months, or you'll have to limit the growth capability of the product altogether, which nobody wants. You want your product to grow, get very popular, and expand as fast as possible. And you don't want to artificially hold it back because your infrastructure just couldn't handle it. You will probably do load testing and things like that and find that, hey, guess what? In order to get this scale even further, we have to go to that next phase of development with distribution across multiple regions and data centers and scalability. You want to be able to scale up and scale down, so auto scaling. It becomes very expensive when you side on the DIY build it yourself scenario. Now, of course, the trade-off here is if you go for the build scenario, right? The build scenario here is in this sort of middle right column. You're going to be able to have full control, though that control is not for free. Everything that you want to tweak and change and modify and add capabilities, that costs time and money, and it will give you that full flexibility. It's just extra cost and ownership. And for example, if you're looking at a vendor, say PubNub in this case, we come with all the capabilities and features that you're going to need in order to be successful, and a whole bunch of others that you'll be able to grow into, and advanced capabilities that we've seen ahead of the time because we've been doing this for 14, 15 years, right? Where we know that the scalability, security, reliability, and a whole bunch of other features and capabilities will be needed for you as you expand your product. And because we support billions of users and our traffic is very vast, when we deal with regular spikes on the daily, we know that we can offer like zero concurrency limitations, right? No limits. You'll be able to scale and grow and rely on a vendor like PubNub in order to manage your systems for real-time data exchange. So whether you're building a mobile app that needs to communicate between multiple parties of users, between apps, and say one user needs to talk to another user, sort of a communication, that's where PubNub comes in, is the in-app chat or in-app notifications, the ability to see where a map icon is updating on the screen, or the ability to remotely control any sort of aspect. All of that is powered by PubNub APIs that you can easily embed into your application without having to worry about the infrastructure and additional resources and cost to scale that hardware. We have a few other key considerations here, such as reliability. You want to make sure that you're always available and that the feature and the capability of that product is going to be available for your end users so they don't experience interruptions due to downtime. And additionally, with monitoring and maintenance, so you can see and track all of the traffic over time. That's critical because you'll need to know what levels of investment into the product features and advancements that you're going to need to make in order to provide a better user experience. Of course, security is required in the industry, and being able to go out the gate with every single feature from a security perspective and all the government mandates and sovereignty requirements for data integrity, reliability, and locality. All those rules and regulations will be taken care of for you by a vendor like PubNub. Oh, look what time it is. We're making that decision again. Are we going to build the software ourselves in-house, or are we going to buy from a vendor? That's always a common requirement. Every single project that comes up whenever we need to add a new feature into our product, such as real-time collaborative features, you're going to look at the market, and you're probably going to go to Google, you're going to type in WebSockets, and you're going to try to figure out how you're going to add this feature and capability into your product. No matter what kind of software stack or feature or capability it is, you're going to perform some research ahead of time, and you're going to look at the open source software solutions that are available that you might choose to host yourself, or you're going to look at all the vendors. There's a lot of vendors out there, and then you'll have to select and choose and pick from those vendors based on the various features and offerings that they provide. So let's just say, for instance, you're looking to add chat functionality inside of your application, where you'll have the ability to have multiple parties communicate with each other via chat within the app. Now that's super critical, because keeping users engaged in your app and present in your app is going to allow you to maintain and grow your business. So this chat feature is going to be a critical feature for expanding into that market. And we have some important things to keep in mind. I would say the important aspects when you're making a decision on whether to choose to purchase from a vendor that sort of API capability, or whether you're going to install some open source software on your servers and sort of maintain and grow and scale and have fault tolerance built in, and all those other fun things that come with building any software. At least from a PubNub perspective, let's take a look here at these top two items that are really critical when you're making a decision on build versus buy. So we have the buy section here on PubNub on the left, and the build side with the thumbs down, the in-house DIY solution. The in-house you basically have to tie up developers' time, extra developers, right? It's going to take more development time in order to build a solution that a vendor could offer you for actually a lower price overall. The upfront cost and ongoing maintenance will be much less expensive with, say, like a PubNub paying from a vendor. And that's why 90% of all software is actually purchased from a vendor and leased either through an API or sort of a web portal UI front end, sort of like a platform as a service or software as a service. All of this is purchased anywhere from HR to finance to management of team members and project management with Jira and overall business, in-house business wikis and Confluence. Security and scanning, all that stuff is purchased, heavily weighted on the vendor side, and typically that is where you're going to go for most of the cases. And very often, I would say it's easy to forget that we will, whenever you make a decision to build that software stack in-house, you will need additional resources. Now, you might not have in the team 4 or 6 developers in this team that will specifically work on it. You still need the number of hours from those individuals to match the number of developers from that perspective, right? So you need essentially 6 full-time developers working on this project for 6 months in order to achieve that goal. So if, say, you don't have that number of developers, you just increase the time to market from there in order to achieve what you're looking for from a product perspective. And very often you leave on the table opportunity cost, potential revenue loss, because if you chose the DIY solution to build it in-house, all that opportunity cost also goes with it. And that's a tough situation, because that means that you could have spent time building features and capabilities into your app a lot sooner, and then even adding more features and capabilities that will help expand the business and expand the market. So it's a lost opportunity, lost revenue, and lost business growth. When you choose to build it in-house, it's a lot better to get to market quickly and launch quickly, get the customers, get the features, and go as fast as possible, because that will change the trajectory growth of the business.